This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by MacPaw, the makers of CleanMyMac X. Your Mac as good as new. Find out more at macpaw.com/podcast. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it seems like we've been catching up with Take Control authors recently. They've been delivering a lot of content and a lot of books for us, and we're going to continue that trend today with Mr. Take Control himself, Joe Kissell. Joe, welcome back. It's good to see you.
Hello, it's nice to be seen.
We haven't done this for a while.
No, it's been a few months. I think it's been at least as long as since my last haircut, which is getting back in time, you know. But you know, we are keeping socially distant here, so.
Well, I don't want to distract you. I am not 6 feet from my screen. That's the only thing. But
I am about about maybe 18 inches from my screen.
Okay, so between us, we may make it.
I have a mask over here I can put on.
Oh, good.
My mask is not easily accessible to mom.
Yeah, mine isn't either. I usually keep mine in the car because that's the only time I use it is when I go out somewhere, which is not
hold
that.
A paper towel up in front of me.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's not that much anymore.
Yeah.
So this time we're going to talk about the newest edition of Take Control of Apple Mail, the 5th edition.
The 5th edition.
Wow. I mean,
well,
Joe, is that the highest edition number in the Take Control series?
No, in fact, Take Control of iCloud is up to its 6th edition, and that is that needs to be updated yet again, which will be, I think, the next thing I'm working on. We might be talking about that in a couple of weeks. And you know, the way editions work, like there's a little bit of like hand waving and smoke and mirrors when it comes to our book titles, because I just looked this up. The first book I wrote for Take Control about Apple Mail was in 2004. 2004. I mean, we started this in October of 2003. So my first book on Apple Mail was called Take Control of Email with Apple Mail. I was back in 2004, and that went through a number of versions, and then the book kind of changed titles. For a while, we were saying, you know, like Take Control of Apple Mail in Tiger and Take Control of Apple Mail Online. It seemed like appropriate at that time for the title of the book to reflect the name of the current operating system. And then at a certain point, we decided, you know, let's just be done with that. Let's just call it Take Control of Apple Mail, and then we'll make a new edition when a new operating system comes out. And so that's been what we've been doing for a number of years. We've skipped around a little bit, like last year, or I guess whenever it was, you know, when Mojave came out. So I guess that's late 2018. We didn't have a new edition of the book. We rebbed it. We rebbed the 4th edition from version 4.0 to version 4.1 because the changes just didn't seem that big. This time around, the changes were more substantial, so we rubbed it to a full 5th edition. But a lot of those decisions are kind of arbitrary. What shall we call it? Is it a new minor version? Is it a new edition? Does it get a new title? We just kind of figure out what seems best. But anyway, I've been writing about this app in some form for Take Control for 16 years. I mean, this book is old enough to drive in some places. This is like, you know, and you know, like, you know, maybe half of those years were kind of okay. Like in the beginning, it was like people are having problems, they're having frustrations, and I'm like, I got this. I can explain to you what you're doing wrong. You just don't understand how it works, but I understand how it works. So I'm gonna correct your errors. You know, I'm gonna show you that you got to go in here and click this thing. You got to go into terminal and do this. I'm gonna show you how you need to behave differently to get mail to work for you. And then time passed and mail changed, and it acquired some features. It lost some features. It acquired some bugs. It acquired some more bugs. And the story kind of changed. And now people keep writing to me and complaining about things that Mail isn't doing right, and they're assuming that it's them. They're assuming I'm doing something wrong. I must be doing something wrong, or would you please just tell me, Joe, what the magic incantation is that I need to use, because I should know it, but I don't. But surely there must just be something that I can do to get the right thing to happen. And increasingly over the last several years, I've had to say, it's not you. It's Apple. Those things that look like bugs, they're actually bugs. Those things that look like design flaws, yeah, they're actually design flaws, and there's nothing you can do about them. So this is a hard book for me, because with every time I revise it, I feel like I have to be more and more apologetic. And it's no longer like this fun, like, yeah, you can take control of Apple Mail. I'm going to teach you how, it's not like that anymore. It's like, well, I'll do the best I can, but I can only do so much, because it's, we're limited by what the program can do. So, people who have watched or listened to previous interviews about earlier iterations of this book may recall that I've had some grouchy moments. When Mavericks came out and Mail had some changes that did some bad things with Gmail, there was a lot of stuff going on there. I was portrayed in a comic as the Hulk and Green Rage Monster, and so we worked through that stuff, but even after that, as more things have changed, I've continued to get grumpier, and so last, whenever it was, October, September, when Catalina came out and Mail had certain changes in it. At that time, I was thinking, okay, well, I got to revise this Mail book right now, and due to combination of factors, I wasn't able to do it right away. We're several revisions into Catalina now, and one or two of the bugs have disappeared, but it's still not great. So even as it, here we are in almost, as we're recording this, it's almost the end of May in 2020, and Catalina's been out for like 7 months, 8 months, longer than that. Anyway, it's been out a good long time. I'm still feeling like, man, I got to revise the book, because it's really very far out of date, but not feeling the love. Not feeling the love.
Yeah, I remember some of those grumpy moments. I tried to edit them out, but then I'd have edited the whole show, which that just didn't work. So
getting out the best part.
Yeah. Okay, so I think it's fair to say that there are a lot of people that think that email is dead, that we're moving toward a lot of other things, and I've said this a million times. Not in my world. I mean, email. We live and die by email, and so and I will also, I need to say that I have not been an Apple Mail user, not as much because of any of the issues you all have talked about. Just I was doing email before Apple Mail came along. I had solutions that worked for me. When I needed to transition, I did not go to Apple Mail because it lacked certain things that I wanted to do.
Yep.
So I'm not as familiar with Apple Mail maybe as I am with some other programs that we talk about. So all that said, is Apple Mail failing with like critical issues here, or is it failing with maybe, let's say, more advanced issues or customizations that not everybody wants to do?
Well, I mean, that depends on your point of view. If you feel that it is a critical issue, that when you move a message from one mailbox to another, it doesn't completely disappear, then I would say, it is failing at critical issues. If that's not important to you, then, hey, like that is literally an issue. It has been an issue since Catalina came out, that under certain circumstances, if you just say, oh, here's a message in one mailbox, I'm going to move it into another mailbox, it looks like the message moves, but when you click the message in the new mailbox, you find out it's completely empty. And you can't get that stuff back. It's just gone. And it's not like this happens 100% of the time for all users. It happens sometimes for some people under some circumstances, but after all these months, it still hasn't been fixed. And I, I, I can't even wrap my head around that. How that could not be a mission critical failure that should just shut down everything at Apple until somebody fixes this problem is beyond me. But there are a few things kind of in that vein, and I don't know anybody at Apple who works on mail. I have no inside information. I have heard some stuff through the grapevine that may or may not be accurate, but certainly the impression I get as an outsider is that mail is pretty low on Apple's list of priorities, especially on the Mac. Maybe not so much on iPhones and iPads. Mail seems to be actually getting better on the mobile platforms, but on the Mac, it just looks like nobody's in charge of it. It looks like it's just we're gonna probably find somebody to go and add a thing to mail just so we have something to put on the web page. I mean, it just sort of looks like that. It doesn't look like any competent manager is really in charge of it. So there are that other category that you said is also there. I mean, there are some things that only more power users are likely to notice. Of course, I notice them. But even with things as simple as moving messages, there are disturbing failures.
Well, and that to me is a pretty big deal, because if you're talking about losing data in email, losing data anywhere, but losing data in email especially is a pretty big deal. So, I mean, so let's go to the book. I mean, I guess you've just revised this book. Is this revised with new issues and how to solve them or work around them, or at least identify them, or did you take another approach to it?
Well, okay. So a lot of the book is just how do you do stuff? What are all these? I want to set up my account, and maybe I don't understand what these certain preferences do. I don't understand. I know that I want to have a certain effect. This is what I want to happen, but I don't know what procedures I have to go through or what settings I have to get that effect that I want. So a lot of the book is just that. Like, for example, on your iPhone or iPad, do different things in mail, and those are actually customizable. But it's not obvious that you can customize them, and when you do customize them, it's not necessarily obvious what the side effects of those customizations may be. There are a lot of things you can do with gestures that you would just never figure out. You never stumble on this just by tapping and swiping around the screen. So I'm trying to say, there's useful stuff in there that if you just knew how to do it, it would make your life so much better. And here's how to do those things. So a lot of the book is just that sort of stuff. There are problems that I can solve, or I can give you, strong hints how to work around. But the best I can do for the other stuff is, and I've said this many times before, and I know other Take Control authors have said the same thing, is just to remind readers that it's not you, it's Apple. So I'm gonna mention one of the things I've heard about the most. So there's this thing in Apple Mail in Catalina called Column View. They used to have something called Classic View, and Classic View gave you an area at the top of the window with date, sender, subject, like a sort of table of your stuff, and then the email down below. Some people prefer that arrangement to Mail's default, which is a sidebar with a list of mailboxes, and then another column that has all of your messages in it. You select a message, and the message appears on the right. So they had this Classic View, and it went away in Catalina, and it was replaced by something called Column View. And, there are lots of column views. Finder has a column view, and Music has a column view, and Apple Books has a column view. We know column views. Column views are very, very a basic thing that appear in lots of apps everywhere. Weird thing about column view in Mail in Catalina, you can't resize the columns. The columns are of a fixed width. And you can't rearrange them. You can't turn columns on or off. You can't resize them. And you can't click a column heading to sort by that. Like all the things that are normal with all column views in all apps have been for decades. You can't do any of those things in column view in Mail in Catalina. And depending on various other settings, like whether you are displaying your message preview at the bottom or the right, you can get Mail into a state where, well, yeah, it's showing a few columns, but each column is like this wide, so you can only read like the first 2 letters of the person's name or the first 2 letters of the subject, and you can't do anything about it. You can't resize it. So everybody's saying, okay, well, Joe, when are you going to update your Apple Mail book to cover Catalina, because I'm really struggling with column view, and it must be that I'm just doing something wrong, or I don't know the trick to get columns to work. There's no trick. It's an inherently broken, flawed feature. It's a half-done feature. How this ever got through quality control at Apple, I can't even conceive how it managed to survive through 5 major revisions of Catalina so far. I can't conceive. So it's that sort of thing where I can't tell you how to fix the problem. I can say this is a problem and it's not your fault and there's nothing you can do about it. Take maybe some comfort in the fact that everybody else is struggling with the same thing and you didn't do anything wrong. But all I can really tell you is don't use that feature, or use a different app. So I wasn't expecting to be this grumpy at this moment in the interview. I thought maybe I'd build up to a greater level of grumpiness later, but
well, maybe that's my fault for just punching the wrong or right button, depending on your perspective, and bringing out the Hulk.
Yeah.
This edition of MacVoices is supported by MacPaw, the makers of CleanMyMac X. If you've been around the Mac for any length of time, there are software titles and publishers that you learn to know and trust. And if you haven't been around the Mac for very long, it's time you start that process. MacPaw has been part of the Mac scene for more than 10 years, as has its flagship utility, CleanMyMac X. That alone says something about both the company and the product. But let me tell you a little more. CleanMyMac X is the utility you want when you want to optimize your Mac for peak performance. Using the Smart Scan, you can delete system log files and caches that are no longer needed. You would be surprised at how many old, abandoned files might be clogging up your Mac. CleanMyMac X even has a malware check built in to help protect you from any software that the bad guys might have installed on your Mac. And best of all, you can download a trial version of CleanMyMac X to check out all the features for yourself. And that's what I want you to do right now. Visit macpaw.com/podcast and download your copy of CleanMyMac X today. That's macpaw.com/podcast, macpaw.com/podcast, to get your trial version of CleanMyMac X. Run the Smart Scan and see what CleanMyMac X can help you get rid of. CleanMyMac X at macpaw.com/podcast. Take it for a spin. Thanks to MacPaw for their support of MacVoices. So I'm still kind of struggling with the idea of potentially losing data. That to me would scare me more than anything. But I mean, so are there procedures or specific things I can avoid doing? I know you mentioned moving from one mailbox to another to make sure that particular bug doesn't bite me.
No. I mean,
Ooh, wow.
honestly, no. You can avoid moving messages. Now, I can tell you that there is some evidence that this problem occurs more frequently when messages have attachments. I can tell you it occurs more frequently when the messages are in an Exchange account. But that doesn't mean it never happens in other, like in IMAP accounts. It doesn't mean it never happens with messages that don't have attachments. Now, of course, I mentioned backups in the book because, this is me we're talking about. But it's hard. It's hard to do backups and restore of email. It's hard. It's complicated. Now, Mail is one of the few apps that Apple ships that still has a sort of built-in connection to Time Machine. So you can actually, within Mail, instead of going out to the Finder, within Mail, you can turn on Time Machine and then go back in time, see how your mailboxes looked at various points in the past, and then in principle, you should be able to just click a message that has been deleted and restore it. I have been struggling to get Time Machine to work properly in Mail. And that might be an artifact of the somewhat unusual Time Machine setup I have in my office. But a lot of things, there are a lot of things about backing up and restoring email that are challenging under the best of conditions, but they're extra challenging in Mail just because of the way it's designed. So, of course, you should have great backups. You should have great backups that go beyond what Time Machine offers. But one of the things I mentioned in the book is, okay, let's say you have lost a message, and let's say you do have backups that were not made using Time Machine. So somewhere on a hard drive someplace is a file that contains that email message that you're missing. And you can probably, it's a little bit challenging to find that file maybe because you're not going to find it by name or anything. It's going to be a bit of a little bit of an effort to find it, but you can find it. You do some kind of a search, you find it in your backups. And now what do you do with that? Well, you can restore that little text file that contains the content of your message. You can restore that to your current hard drive, but unless you're using Time Machine, you can't actually put it back into Mail. You can't. I mean, there's a long, complex procedure you could use to blah, 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 eventually import it. But you'll have this file and you double click the file and great, that message is opened in Mail. There's a file that's on my desktop or someplace. I can double click it. I can see my message. So I haven't lost the message. The message is still there. But if I want to get just that one message, not a whole mailbox, if I want to get just that one message back into Mail, it's so complicated that you're probably not going to bother. So backups can help. I mean, it's way better to have your missing message as a file on your disk that you can at least read than to have it be gone forever. That is unquestionably an improvement. But not being able to conveniently get at that message in Mail is less than ideal. So what we're getting to is the point where I feel like this book that I have updated umpteen times is an endorsement of this app. This is the app that I use for email, and I am a very, very heavy email user. And I feel like I've been saying for 16 years, hey, if this is good enough for me, it's good enough for you. And I'm really running out of patience with Mail. I have said repeatedly, I've tried every other email app I can get my hands on, and I try it for a bit, and I'm like, no. It can't. It's won't do something that I need it to do, or it does things that I really don't want it to do. But I feel like my relationship with Apple Mail could be on the rocks. I feel like what I hope for, of course, every year when Apple announces the next version of macOS, what I hope for is this is going to be the year that they finally pay attention to this app. This is going to be the year they finally say, we really, really get it. We care. We're going to fix all the bugs. We're going to restore missing features. We are going to turn this into the genuine, useful power tool that it used to be and it still could be. And maybe it'll happen this year. It could. I don't know. I have no idea. There could come a point when Apple just says, yeah, we're ready to do it, and here it is. I'm not banking on that though, because I've been disappointed so many times in a row. So so I've got my sights set elsewhere.
And it is surprising, because if these are problems that I'll say a majority of users are having, then, I mean, it's one thing to be inconvenienced. It's one thing to be restricted in a program's feature set, because we all have things that, gee, if only my app would do this. And yeah, and you write to the developer and they say, yeah, it's on the list, and it never gets there. But if sounds like these are pretty common things, and I guess I still can't get past the losing the data thing. So this is not a POP email client. This is an IMAP client. So
Yeah.
it's losing things on the server. I mean,
yeah, somehow I don't know exactly what's going on behind the scenes, but what I think should be happening is that it just tells the IMAP server, change the mailbox name that this is in. Like, it's not rocket science, but something is happening such that the message, part of the message header or all the message header does get transferred to the new mailbox, but the message content doesn't. So, and you can, I mean, I can send you URLs where you can read about this online, where people are complaining. So Michael Tsai, who wrote Spam Sieve, had a couple of blog entries on this with lots and lots of reader comments, and really digging into this problem and who's experiencing it, and under what circumstances and why. And I linked to that stuff in the book. But I know some people that work on Mail plugins who have fairly intimate knowledge of how Mail does stuff. Certainly, much deeper behind the scenes knowledge than I do. And I have not heard very many complimentary things about Mail's inner workings. So
Joe and I had scheduled the interview for Take Control of Apple Mail 5th edition for about 30 minutes. And originally we were just going to hit the highlights of Apple Mail and some of the new changes that have come out with the most recent edition. And as you can tell, we went down a couple rat holes. Joe had a lot to say about the state of Apple Mail and some of his frustrations with it. And then we also got into more discussions. So we're going to make this a two-parter. In the second part, Joe talks a bit more about what can be done with Apple Mail, especially through the use of third-party plugins. And he picks some of his favorites and explains why they are his favorites and what they are. And also outlines a little more about what this particular book can deliver for you as an Apple Mail user, in spite of all the challenges and problems. So that's the way it's going. That's the first part. We're going to do the second part in the next edition of MacVoices. I hope you'll join us. Until then, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.